Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my VR response to Robin over at Toadstool Tarot for his tag Decks Discovered Through Others. I had so many decks that I had to split this into 2 parts, so if you haven't seen part 1, go back and watch part 1. There's loads of beautiful decks on there, but this is part 2 and I thought I would start part 2 by taking it right back to the beginning, to the very first deck that I was influenced to buy after I just discovered Tarot Tube. This isn't my very first deck I ever purchased. That was the Wild Unknown. This was my second tarot purchased ever, and it was the first deck that I bought after I found Tarot Tube, and I was inspired by seeing this deck on Kelly's channel, The Truth in Story. Now, who hasn't been influenced to get a deck from the channel The Truth in Story? Kelly does the most wonderful, long, in-depth walkthroughs of decks, and she's just got the most wonderful channel. The time difference means I often miss her lives, so that's a real shame because I would love to be able to join in the community for her lives. But I just do love her channel. I found quite a few decks actually through Kelly, as I'm sure we all have. So Kelly, thank you so much for all you do on Tarot Tube. It's wonderful, really. It's a real generosity of spirit to share your time and your opinions and all these wonderful decks. It's just wonderful. So this is the wonderful Muse Tarot, which got shelved for a while I was coming to terms with the fact that actually I like collage. I tried to resist it. Again, that was a Tarot Tube influence, but eventually I let my own voice sing true and celebrate collage, and this deck now is an absolute firm favourite, along with all my other Chris Ann decks, to be honest. I love Chris Ann as a tarot creator. I just think these are the most sublime cards, and it's my very favourite colour combination, this sort of turquoise green with the pink. Oh, it's just such a glorious colourway, which you often see in the cards, like in this Empress card as well. I love the colour palette, love the imagery, love Chris Ann's decks. It's got roses in. What's not to love? Just, oh, it's wonderful. But this isn't the only deck that Kelly at The Truth in Story influenced me into getting. I wonder if anybody can guess before I show it. I think it's one of those decks that you associate with her. Well, I do anyway. It's in its own special box. And this is Journey to the Hidden Realm, is it? Is it? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Again, this is beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. But whenever I see this deck and look at it, I do think of Kelly, because she has talked about this deck quite a bit, and I know she loves it, and it is spectacular. I think probably this is my closest I'd get to what I think of like secret woodland fae are. For me, this is a real fae energy deck, and I love it. Look at it. I love that death card. So it is one that I did work with across a few years ago, and I think it might have to come back out. I think I want to work with these archetypes. It's a fascinating deck. The up close and personal of the imagery is wonderful. You really feel like you're in the middle of a forest and you've stumbled across like the fae or something. It feels very Celtic as well to me. It's got that feeling of an Irish woodland somewhere. Oh, I love it. It's got Morrigan vibes as well all over it as well, which of course is really important to me. So the Muse and the journey to, do you know what, I'm not sure what this deck is called. It always goes out of my mind. You're all screaming it at the video, I know. The journey to the forbidden realm, I think it's that. If it's not that, I'll put the proper name on screen. But those are Kelly Made Me Do It decks, and I love it. So from one Kelly to another Kelly, this deck was influenced for me to go and buy it by the equally wonderful Kelly over at Lost Girl Reads. Now, I love Kelly's channel. I think she's an absolute sweetheart on Tarot Tube. If you've not visited Kelly yet, go and say hi. She's wonderful. This box, however, is not quite so wonderful. It always does this. I always get cards stuck down the side. Bear with me one moment while I get these cards out. I do love the little picture at the bottom, but I just wish the cards couldn't escape. So Kelly over at Lost Girl Reads, she was sharing this deck, gosh, I think it was about 2 years ago now, and I ended up getting it as part of my Christmas stash. It is very sort of Harry Potter, Hogwarts. It's a story time deck. It has a story running through it, and I saw it and I just fell in love with all the multicoloured hair. I fell in love with the art style. I fell in love with the fact that it's got a story time element to it. I fell in love with the little budgie and all the familiars that are throughout the deck. And of course, anything for me that feels sort of Harry Pottery or Hogwartsy. I am still mourning the fact I never got my Hogwarts letter. And there are many of us Harry Potter geeks that feel the same. This is a little step or a foot in the door to Hogwarts, and I love it for that. But it was definitely watching Kelly's channel when she very first started sharing videos that made me go out and buy this deck. So Kelly, thank you for what you do over on your channel, and thank you for introducing me to this little gem. Look at it. It just feels light and it feels bright, and it just feels, I don't know, it feels like a transportation into story and all the magic that you find in story. So yeah, this is an absolute winner. I love it. It's a little gem. Kelly, thank you very much for influencing me into this deck. Okay, the next deck is the Tarot del Fuego. Now, who introduced me to this? It couldn't be a decks discovered through others without sharing the name of Simon at the Hermit's Cave, because it was Simon's video when he was doing a flick through of this that I first saw it, and it is one of those moments where you stop the video mid-sentence, which is very rude, but you do, and you run straight to your computer and you order the deck before the person has even got to the end of their sentence. It was one of those moments. So Simon, you made me do it, as I'm certain you make many people go and buy decks, which is wonderful really. It's lovely that we have access to watch other people's videos and to be able to look at the expanse and the breadth of art styles and cardstocks and deck creators and imagery to decide what we will or we won't bring in. I think it's wonderful. Of course, Simon's got an expansive, huge collection, which makes me salivate looking at the shelves behind Simon and his altar spaces. It's just all so luscious and wonderful and expansive. Now, this Ace of Cups card is the card that made me stop Simon's video and run and order the deck. I just loved it so much. having 3 babies myself, this touched something to the very core of me that I just loved, and that idea of love pouring out. I miss the days of nursing my own babies. It's just such a magical connection that is just pure love. So when I saw the Ace of Cups depicted as that, I got it. I absolutely got it, and I loved it. And I thought, no matter what, I need this deck in my collection. So, Simon, we bonded over a nipple on this deck. So thank you very much. It's a marvellous thing to do that. And thank you for all you do on TarotTube. You are a wealth of information, and you're a wealth of sharing, and it's very much appreciated. Okay, the next decks, plural, that I've got to share were introduced to me by the most glorious human being ever. She is probably the most dangerous person to watch for me on TarotTube. Her channel is the one place that I could get seriously poor to keep watching, just because she's got the most eclectic, marvellous deck collection. And when she shares things, I think because I love her so much, I just, anything she says, just I think, oh yes, I agree with that, because she's absolutely wonderful. So the first deck that I'm going to share is the Canary G Oracle, which I pounced on. It was another one of those pause the video mid-video and immediately buy moments, and yet I still haven't really used this deck. This is definitely going to have to be a focus for next year. Now, who am I talking about? Who is a danger zone for me when it comes to buying decks? It's the glorious, the one and only Meg over at Rose Honey Ritual, and Meg is just glorious. I feel so touched by some of the friends that I've made in the tarot community, both sides of the camera. I have to say, both sides of the camera. Just like-minded, kind, wonderful, giving people who kind of get you in your madness, really, because really the rest of the most of the population thinks that this is all a bit weird. I know they do, because I have people tell me that in real life. So it's nice to meet a group of people that absolutely not only get it, but also enthuse about it all. Now, this deck, I like circle decks. I like the art style in this deck. But for me, it's the titles. Look, a swan in a crowd of crows touching the star-kissed leaf. Now, when I do paintings or artwork myself, often I will have the title first. It will just be a phrase or a series of ideas that's led to just a title popping into my mind, and I will write the title down with no idea of what artwork I'm going to do from it, but I know it's a title that I want to use. So for me, titles are really important. They can be the catalyst of the whole artwork itself, and I think you see it in this deck. It's the only deck really that I've seen use titles the way that I view titles. Look, your heart in sync with cricket song. Just where your imagination can run from that sort of emotive title. It can take you to so many different places. Kissed by whale spray. I mean, how delightful is that? Every star is a doorknob. I mean, it just makes my heart sing. Snake encircles the moon, or the self-seeing eye. You get what I'm saying. It's the titles. It's this wonderful watercolor art. It's the fact it's a circle deck, which makes it like its own unique being before you've even begun. And the fact that Meg introduced it to me, look, your feet are two fish. Just, I love it so much. This has got to be my deck for next year at some point. So Meg, that was the first deck that you introduced me to. That was one where I stopped your video mid-video to order because I was blown away by it. These next two decks were also influenced by Meg, but I took a while to buy them because I associate them so much with Meg. I didn't know whether I could unleash them from Meg and use them myself. Does that make any sense? So the first one is Nature's Wisdom Message Cards by Scott Alexander King. You can see by the gap they come in, they are tiny. That was my first real big surprise with how little they are. Now they are out in front of me. I'm going to show you a video here of where they are in front of me because they're on my altar surrounded by dolls next to the Crow Tarot, because I use these cards for working with the Crow Tarot. And I first brought this deck out, I was doing a reading with the Morrigan. I used my Crow Tarot as a way to communicate with the Morrigan. The Crow Tarot is continually out on my altar, and it's my Morrigan deck, and it's used an awful lot. I was confused one day by a reading, and because these are such tiny little cards, and I just bought the deck, I reached out for this deck just as clarifier cards because I could throw them on top because they were smaller. But oh my goodness, the way they work together, it was like stepping into sacred space. It was like stepping into a magic circle. It was uncanny. It beyond just oh yeah, that makes sense. It was something different than that. It was beyond that. It was mind-blowing. And so much so I pulled another reading to test it again and thought, right, I think that's the meaning. Show me with the Nature Wisdom cards, which have messages on the back like that. Oh, and again and every time. So this deck has never been away since then, since that first just random reach for a small clarifier. It's never been put away. It lives next to the Crow Tarot on my altar, and these two decks work together for conversations with the Morrigan. So in a way it kind of did unleash itself from the idea that this is Meg's deck to become my own deck because of the role that it stepped into, and it kind of grabbed that role and immediately became a Morrigan deck. So it belongs to the Morrigan for me now, this deck. I mean, look at this with the imagery and the fire and a reptile there, a lizard. I love it so much. And a seedling to a flower with the magician. Can you see? Oh, I just love it. So Meg absolutely was the reason. She was the sole reason that I bought Nature's Wisdom message cards, because I'd seen her use it so much and I thought it was such a lovely, interesting deck. I was also looking for more photography decks in my collection because it was where I had an absolute gap in my collection, but it just turned into something so magical. And we finish with antlers and horns matching, just incredible. So that was another deck that was absolutely and totally influenced by wonderful Meg. But I've got one more as well, and this other one as well. I did hesitate to buy this other deck because for me this is a Meg deck as well. This is the Tantric Teini Oracle. And I know that other people have shared this deck, but in my mind I just associate this deck with Meg. So I bought it and I haven't even open the whole thing yet. Look at this, I've not even opened it all. Why not? Why don't we just open this other half? I kind of need to turn this deck into my deck, and we're not going to do that while it's, sorry, I'm getting distracted by new cards. We're not going to turn it into my deck until it's actually open. And again, I like the titles on this: Serpent Power, High Tension, Blow Your Mind, Wave of Bliss. They're titles that do, again, like the Canary G Oracle, they have an imaginative sort of artwork idea behind them that can take you off onto different tangents of meaning, like Heart Drop, Like a Bubble. Just wonderful. Horseplay. So yeah, it's such an interesting deck. The Deep End, the Rose Garden. I mean, it's just bizarre. Look, you've got a horse in a tree and a banana. Totally bananas. It is totally bananas. I just said that. So fascinating. Pearls Before Swine. I love it. Fascinating. And this is going to be really interesting to see where this begins to find its place in my tarot practice. Oh my gosh, it's fabulous, isn't it? So that is the Tantric Teini. I'm certain there are many more in my collection that Meg has inspired as well. So Meg, darling, thank you so much for your lovely channel, which is a constant source of encouragement and friendship. You are the most glorious human being, and I am so grateful for you. And another person I am incredibly grateful for on TarotTube is my Garden Arcana buddy, a fellow gardener, the wonderful, cozy and delightful Thea over at Garden Goddess Tarot. She just feels like a warm hug every time Thea does. And I am pretty certain that, as well as introducing me to a love of Greek mythology via her incredible Hellenic oracle, I'm sure she's the first person I saw talking about the Cosmic Tribe Tarot, which went for me from absolute revulsion to, do you know what, that deck has got something. Now I'm going to give a nudity warning. This deck with these amazing backs is full of nudity, so if you have a problem with that, look away for the next few minutes. This is, I've already decided, going to be one of my deep dive decks for next year. It is wonderful. I think some of this geometric patterning and the colours, it's just so stunning. There is a lot of especially male nudity in here, so for me, I brought it with a challenge to begin to, or no, not to begin, to continue to reclaim the divine masculine back into my life and into my soul, and to mend that relationship. What a perfect deck for that. And just to delight in this colour and the imagery. It's Thoth based, this deck, so I think I am going to work with this alongside the Thoth Tarot, and oh my gosh, it is just wonderful. I can't believe I ever had an aversion to it. Look at it. It's like some 80s disco from old. I love it. I absolutely love it now. I just think it's marvellous. I can't wait now to work with it. It was a complete 360 turnaround on this deck. Thea, thank you for introducing me to it. I love it and I can't wait to work with it. There's a complete exciting turnaround for me, and I think once I open the full deck and I've been flicking through the cards on and off, I'm beginning to see more and more the beauty of all those geometric patterns that kind of mirror the Thoth cards as well. So the Cosmic Tribe Tarot, watch this space, and Thea, thank you for all you do. We have our second circle deck now of this VR response. So this is the Circle of Life Tarot, which is a sort of fairy deck. It was one that I found actually at my local metaphysical store. They had a backroom table with for sale decks on. This was like half price. I think it was £10, so it was an absolute steal. But I pounced on it because I had seen this deck with one of my very favourite people on the whole of Tarot Tube, Renee over at Meadowlark Mystic, who, to be honest, I class Renee like family, to be honest. She is the most wonderful soul sister to me. I just love the bones of her. She hasn't made many videos lately. She's been super busy, so I am missing her on Tarot Tube, but I'm lucky enough to have her in my life behind the scenes as well. So Renee, oh my gosh, you really made me fall in love with this deck, and you introduced me to this deck to start with. It's fascinating. Again, it's got that kind of storybook element to it as well. It definitely is full of fae energy and sort of otherworld energy. It's storytelling time, isn't it, this deck? So I'm getting completely lost in the images. These are the backs. The backs are wonderful. I did go through a phase of drawing loads of mandalas in my artwork, so I've got a real love of artwork drawn in circles. I mean, look at this imagery, isn't it incredible? There are so many decks I want to do deep dives with. I need to get organised and focused for next year so these amazing decks don't go wanting, but this is really something else. So Renee, thank you so much, and that is the Circle of Life Tarot. Okay, this next deck, Jolie's Legrande, Circus and Sideshow Tarot. Now I'm sharing this deck because this deck was introduced to me by, oh, by the way, clown warning, big clown warning for this. If you don't like clowns, look away for the next few minutes. Now, this deck I first saw on Sedana's channel. So her channel is Integrative Healing with Sedana, and when I first came on Tarot Tube, it was probably Sedana that introduced me, to be honest, to the most decks. She was doing videos then where she would share deck pairs. She had a stack of decks next to her and she would show all the different pairs. It was Sedana that first introduced me to the fact that I definitely wanted to work with deck pairings, not single decks by themselves. So it was her that made my mind up with that. And watching her do those deck pairings, to be honest, I found so many different decks and fine-honed my ideas of what types of decks I wanted to buy. Back then I was completely new to tarot. I'd never seen any decks at all. I think between Sedana and Simon and Kelly at The Truth in Story, those were the three channels really that helped me begin to find decks that I wanted to bring into my collection. And this, I can remember, was definitely my first introduction to this deck in particular. I've left a gap in the middle because I also want to talk about this deck, the Divine Circus Oracle. It's an Alana Fairchild deck. This is the Blue Angel first edition, which has the borders, which is the edition I love. and I'm putting them together because I do use these like a bonded pair. Now this deck I was first introduced by Racine over at Owl Moon 513, is it? Anyway, I'm sure you all know the gloriously beautiful Racine over at Owl Moon. I know that she has done a few videos, I think, with her love of this deck, and I know she talks about Alana Fairchild. She's also done videos talking about all the Big Eyed Girl decks as well, the Jasmine Beckett Griffith artwork. So it was definitely Racine that first introduced me to this deck, but I love putting these two together. It's that circus theme, it's the colour palette, I think it's the way the cards are laid out. Like this kind of has like a double frame border, and this does the same thing, although it's slightly different coloured borders. I think just the layout is something similar. Of course, it's thematically similar. Colour palette, again, it's very similar, and I've just always loved the way that these two speak together. So a huge shout out to Racine, who's currently doing some brilliant glamour magic videos, so go and check those out. And of course to the amazing Sedana, who has the most amazing presence, I think, and energy, and although her videos often come out at different times to when I can join lives, which I really miss, her channel is so wonderful. I'm linking all these channels down below, guys. So if you haven't discovered any of these channels yet, which I'm absolutely certain you have, but if you haven't, then go check them out. And can we just look at the patterns of the tattoo there with the patterns on the jester's hat? Just amazing. The next deck I want to share is one of the most beautiful decks I think I own. This is Tarot of the Spirit by Pamela and Joyce Eakins. It does come with a little white book, but there are two enormous books as well. Really fantastic. I'm slowly working my way through them. This deck comes with a transparent Tree of Life overlay, which you can put over the top. It's Kabbalistic. It does use the Tree of Life within its meanings and within its artwork, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely stunning, I think. And I first saw this deck on Giselle's channel, on our very own Mad Witch's channel. And now Giselle, she's a fantastic artist. She does embroideries, she makes dolls, she's a watercolour artist, she's a cook, she's a gardener, although she might disagree on some of those because she is very humble, which she shouldn't be, because I think if you spend 5 minutes on Giselle's channel, you'll know that she's just a wonderful soul to sit and spend time with. But I saw it on her channel, and I can remember sitting up bolt upright. I think I left a comment on there saying that is the most beautiful deck I have ever laid my eyes on, and I still stand by that. I think it's one of the most beautiful decks out there. I think there's just something about this artwork which surprises me, because I wouldn't necessarily have said that this was my type of artwork, but there you go. I just love it. So it is more Thoth based than Rider-Waite based, as you can see by the titles on there, and it's wonderful. It is a corker of a deck. The big book that goes with it, that gives you the long descriptions of the cards, is incredible. Yeah, and it's wonderful. So Giselle, thank you so much for all you do and all you share and all the inspiration you bring and for introducing me to the Tarot of the Spirit. The next two decks, I've got two decks here that were introduced to me by the wonderful Jessica over at Jessica and the Moon. The first one, in fact, it's three, because Jessica, you also inspired me to get the Weaver's Oracle, which I will be eternally grateful for, because the Weaver's Oracle is like a absolute bedrock of my spiritual practice, which reminds me of Lisa at Caradrin's Cauldron. Lisa, I can remember you saying that once to me and me agreeing with it. Lisa's stopped making videos now, which is a massive shame, but hi Lisa, if you're still watching. This deck in particular was Jessica over at Jessica and the Moon. This is the Luminous Void Tarot, and it was the very first indie deck I ever saved up and bought myself for my birthday present a few years ago now. I bought the Luminous Void Tarot and I bought the Weaver's Oracle. Those were the two decks I bought. Now the Luminous Void Tarot does come in two sizes. This is the smaller size, and this is still a big deck, so it does come in a much bigger size, but I would never have been able to have handled that with my little hands. And it is by the same artist as that circular cantigee oracle that I shared earlier. It's this kind of washy, whimsical watercolour work that just hints at the figures and sort of dissolves the figures into something magical, like magical beings kind of disappearing into the cardstock. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the backs. I love the shapes of the cards. And it was so exciting to get this. So my very first indie tarot deck. And oh boy, how special did I feel that birthday when I opened this up on my birthday. So Jessica over at Jessica and the Moon, if you go to her channel, there's so much to see over there, and it's a perfect time of year to visit if you've never found Jessica before, because Jessica does some brilliant videos about journals and all the new journals that are available. So this time of year in particular, Jessica is a must land at place, just if you have any interest in journaling. Now, another deck that Jessica introduced me to was this Many Queens Tarot. I first saw this on Jessica's channel and fell in love with it. I'm a sucker for eyeballs in decks anyway. And this one, I just thought the characters in this were so unbelievably quirky. I love ink work personally in my own art practice to draw with. I do a lot of just black and white ink work, which I love. So immediately the art spoke to me and I loved it. And in the video that I watched of Jessica sharing this, she wasn't too sure about how she was getting on working with the deck, and she had some reservations about it for her own personal tarot practice. So in my comment on her video, I think I said something like, I am smitten by it, I love it. If you ever want to consider reselling it, I'd be interested in buying it off you, because Jessica's based in Wales and I'm based half of my time in Wales as well and in England, so it was easy to post. And Jessica she contacted me and we arranged a price, and I actually brought this deck off Jessica. So not only did she introduce me to the deck, but I ended up with that very deck that I saw, and I am so pleased I've got it. I still love it. It still makes me laugh. I just think it's the most quirky, fantastic, delightful deck. So that is Many Queens Tarot. Again, another one introduced to me through the wonderful Jessica over at Jessica and the Moon. So the next two decks, I've got two decks here that were both introduced to me and inspired into my collection by Lennon over at Lennon Smith. So this first deck is Eleanor Enzi Prince's Tarot of the Crone, which I got when it went into a new print run, which it sometimes does. It did go missing in transit for months, and this actually had to be resent to me. This is a second deck. Somewhere out in the ether there is a Tarot of the Crone that never got delivered anywhere. Hearing Lennon talk about her experience with this deck was just really impacting, and being of crone age myself and really feeling like I stand squarely in this sort of energy these days, I just knew it was a no-brainer that at some point this would be a deck that I wanted to buy. So I think this was a birthday present to myself in my second year of tarot. It might have been. Normally for indie decks, I normally save up for an indie deck for my birthday and an indie deck for Christmas. This might have been an additional one that year actually, because I just ordered when the print run became available of some new decks, and it's glorious. I think the artwork and the power of the images speak for themselves. But it was definitely listening to Lennon talk about this deck. I think Lennon always talks about crone energy and crone energy magic with a real passion and an energy and a love for that type of thing that just you can't help but get enthralled by it. So this was definitely a thank you, Lennon, for inspiring me into this one. But it's not the only deck that Lennon inspired me into, because there is a second deck that I think Lennon has shared with the same sort of enthusiasm, and it's one that I managed to pick up quite cheaply second hand because it's hard to get, and that is the Shining Tribe Tarot. So I got this second hand on eBay with the guidebook, and it's another one where the enthusiasm and the memories that she spoke about when working with this deck, you couldn't help but just fall in love with the deck because of that. Swept away on the tide of somebody else's enthusiasm is always a way, I think, where we end up buying decks, which isn't a bad thing at all, as long as you're then prepared to do the work yourself to connect with the deck in your own way. This is one that I haven't done that work yet with, not because I don't love it, but because the time just hasn't felt right yet. So this is one still in waiting for me. So at the minute this still feels more like Lennon's deck, if that makes sense. I'm yet to make this my own. And I also know my friend Renee, she did a complete redraw inspired by this deck. So in a way it feels like Renee's deck as well. So it will be interesting to see how that changes as I start to work with it. For me, this feels like one that I want to take out into landscape to work with. Definitely, as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, yes, that's it. It needs to be outside. So this is the Shining Tribe Tarot, but Lennon definitely held the door open for me to walk through and to purchase this one. And lastly, I have two decks in purple bags, both by the same creator, who I am going to forget what they're called. I'm definitely going to forget. Well, this is the Creativity Oracle, and this is the big 20th anniversary edition of the Enchanted Tarot. Both textile art pieces, both by the same creators. I'll put their name on screen now because it's completely gone out of my head. But these creators and these decks I first saw on the glorious Evie's channel. Evie of Fairy Wren Whispers. Now, Evie is, she's the most special gentle person, I think, on the whole of Tarot Tube. She'll often leave me these comments that are just so full of kindness and gentleness. She has a real gentle spirit, which I think kind of feels like these decks as well. So whenever I think about these decks, I do think about Evie. So Evie will often take her decks out into her garden. She lives in Australia. I think it's Australia, yeah, and she has the most amazing garden with sounds in her garden that are just so alien to a English person's ears, like the birds that do bird song in her garden sound like something we've never heard here in England. So I find that fascinating. She will often do sort of spirit connection work, or she will take like charms and Scrabble letters and tarot cards and flowers and bring them all out into her garden all together, and it's just so special. So if you haven't found Evie's channel yet, again, like I said before, I'm linking all the channels below. She's wonderful, and I just love the fact that such a soft, gentle spirit as Evie is the person that introduced me to these kind of soft, quilted textile artwork decks. It just feels fitting. So those are my last two decks I'm going to share. So that is such a lot. I had to break this VR into 2 videos, so if you haven't seen part 1, I'll link that in the description box. This was part 2. Thank you, Robin, over at Toadstool Tarot, for such an interesting tag. It's just been really nice to reminisce where I first saw all these decks and all the wonderful channels that we have here on YouTube. There are other decks as well that I know I've been inspired by. There are some decks that I just couldn't remember channel names. So thanks to everybody really on Tarot Tube for making it such a fun, interesting and creative space to be in, and thanks you lot for watching too. I'll see you next time. Bye.